Welcome to Dr Joe Unplugged. This podcast contains general information and is not in any way medical advice. There's very little that's new under the sun. We tend to think these days that we're very clever in the 21st century and that any old ideas must necessarily be wrong or they haven't been proven by the science, and that we know far, far more than our ancestors. Now, in some respects, we do. We've got these devices. They didn't exist 25 to 30 years ago. Smartphones really came about in the late 2000s. It's less than one generation. Even computers, yes, they first started in the late 60s, but really only become ubiquitous probably since the 1990s. So technology has advanced. We've got motor cars. We can fly around the world. All of that is really good. So yes, from a technological point of view, we've advanced. From, in some respects, a scientific point of view, we have also advanced in terms of our knowledge. But equally, we've also lost sight at times of some of the basics. And, we look around the world and we see high rates of chronic disease. And this is something we've spoken about in a previous podcast, in particular relation to people not necessarily being active enough and increased consumption of processed food and the following of the low-fat dietary guidelines. Now, back in the old days, and when I say the old days, I'm talking about probably, 30, 40, 50 years ago, probably your parents and grandparents told you not to eat so quickly. And often as children, we'd like, to be doing other things, so we may tend to sort of gobble down the food and, then try to race off to do something else. But even as adults, there can be this, I need to sort of get through my lunch quickly because I'm busy and I've got other things to do. Historically, this is probably not what people did. And the advice to eat more slowly actually is useful. Why is that the case? Sounds fairly obvious, but if we eat more slowly, then our stomach has the opportunity to keep up with what we're doing. So therefore, the brain gets the message that we're full, more appropriately in terms of how much we're eating. So we can eat more food if we're eating more quickly because the brain isn't sort of keeping up as quickly with how full the stomach is. It sounded a little bit circular, but essentially, yes, you can fill it up more quickly and then, we're full, but maybe a bit more than full. The Japanese have an adage that says you should leave the table when you're 80% full, and they do have lower rates of overweight and obesity in Japan than some other societies. But again, there was something intuitive that previous generations knew about not eating too quickly, even if they didn't have the science to back it up. Well, now, as sometimes happens, science has caught up with what previous generations intuitively knew, and it turns out that if we do eat too quickly, not only might we end up eating more because we don't get the message that we're full, but there are higher rates of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes in people who tend to eat quickly. Now, that's not the only factor. And it's very rare in anything in medicine that there is or health, that there is a single factor. So it's not quite as simple as this, but every component is useful and helpful. And to eat a bit more slowly doesn't cost us anything. We don't need government programs. We don't need a prescription from anybody. It's something that we can do, and we can encourage our children and our family to do so as well. So this work has shown that people who eat more quickly, they tend to have higher glucose levels in the bloodstream with eating. And again, that makes sense because it's getting pushed into the bloodstream more quickly in the same way as you're getting into the stomach more quickly. In turn, this can lead to more insulin being produced, and in turn, that can eventually lead to insulin resistance, and the next step can be type 2 diabetes. Now, none of this is inevitable, and it's really important to say that no, eating slowly doesn't guarantee that you can't eat too much. You can just keep eating if you want to, and it doesn't guarantee that you can't get type 2 diabetes. There are other factors at play. But why not do all that you can do to make it less rather than more likely that you may develop these problems? And there are a number of benefits to eating slowly aside from the metabolic ones. You're more likely to enjoy your food. And sense of taste is not something we think about as much as perhaps our sense of vision or our hearing or our sense of touch. But, Smell and taste are important if we're eating more slowly, apart from giving the body more time to absorb and digest and absorb the food. We're also likely to enjoy it more. Now, part of this problem too can be if we are reliant on a lot of relatively tasteless or not particularly nutritious processed and packaged foods. So if we're enjoying our food more, then there's that advantage. And if we are eating in company now, whether that is with family or with friends or with your partner or spouse, there's also the opportunity to chat. And there's been work done previously that shows that families that eat together at the dining room table, there's lower rates of obesity in those children. Because again, they're sitting down to eat their meal. They're not just scoffing it in front of the TV or the Xbox or PlayStations that may be these days. So there's actually that focus on the food. And that's really beneficial. And our ancestors intuitively knew this without having any studies to inform them. They just knew it. We tend to have lost some of this in the modern society. So there's a lot of benefits that we have in modern society. It doesn't mean that we need to throw out that which our ancestors did, especially those ways of living that not only are beneficial for our health, but probably good for our mental health as well. To be able to pause in the day, to have something to eat that you enjoy, and by eating it more slowly, you get more enjoyment, and you're less likely to overeat. And it's also, particularly for children, instilling those good habits from an early age that, what you put into your body is important. It's not something to be rushed. It's not to be glossed over. It actually is important. So eating good food, and again, tastes vary, so, that's to the individual and families. So eating good food, enjoying it, and where applicable, also that social connection and the opportunity to chat over the dinner table, also very important. Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also follow it on all the socials. There'll be new content uploaded each week.